All right, today I wanted to talk about The Gentleman, which is a kind of comedy, action, gangster, English gangster movie by Guy Ritchie, kind of following in from his previous movies, which were Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then, of course, Snatch as well. Kind of following in a little bit different of a tone of a story than these two, but it kind of follows his signature style, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is I guess you'd call it the multi-thread story sort of ideal, where basically what you have is normal stories follow like two or usually just two point of views. Basically, you have the protagonist, and then of course the antag maybe or something like that. And basically you'll kind of have this, ta-da, this great victory, collapsing defeat, right there, bam. And that's kind of how it usually follows. This is a generic story. But what you may then have, if we were to take this plot, and divide it up into sections, is we may show, like, let's see, this section is going to be from the protagonist, and this section is going to be from the antagonist, and then this section is the protagonist, this section is the antagonist, this is the protagonist, this is the antagonist, and then this is the protagonist. Something like that, basically. Usually you wouldn't have the protagonist featured so much. Usually it would be something like a 90-10 probably ratio, where it's 90% protagonist, 10% antagonist. But you could do a few various things. We talked about The Foreigner, where with Jackie Chan, and that one's a bizarre one, because remember, it's a lot of the story is actually told from Pierce Brosnan's character. So that one may be like a 50-50 or something like that. You can play with that a little bit of an aspect. But this is the generic story. And what you're relying on plot line. Basically, we'll call this plot line A and plot line B. And what you kind of want to do is you want to have each of these moments to combo off each other, or parry off of each other. So basically what you're going to do here is you're going to have plot line A is going to do here, and then it's going to get interesting, or there's going to be like a question right here, and then we're going to switch to plotline B. So while we're going through plotline B, we're watching plotline B, wondering what's going to happen here. And then right when we get to here, we'll maybe have a different question, And the question could be anything. It could be basically, it could be any of these questions. What happens next? Who's that guy? Or how does this connect with plot A? That could be it. Like, you don't necessarily even have to have a direct, leading the horse to the question sort of deal, because what you've got is the audience is immediately going to, in their head, try and figure out how this relates. How does this, what you're telling me here, how does this relate to plot A? And so basically from here. And what the advantage does to this is that it gives you can skip a lot of boring parts, basically. Because what you can do is you can have all the boring parts basically told from a different point of view. And this is the reason why people do that. They'll be like, oh yeah, did you hear so-and-so? Yeah, they went around to 39 different houses and talked to all these people. And then it's like, wow, 39, that's a lot. And then that's it. We don't have to show the main character doing 39 houses or even hint at it. We can just basically see at it from a outside perspective. So, but this is how it works. And usually what it'll do is a movie will probably have, generally movies are like, 70 to 80% here. And then they're like 10% villain, and then 10% side characters, and then 10% other, or something like that. This is the one where you'll have, the intro will show the scientists working on something, and then disaster strikes and monsters arrive, and that's your intro. And then the main character goes, and then that character, this, never happens ever again, something like that. So it could be like protagonist 1, and then protagonist 2 could be here, and then protagonist 2 could be here, and then protagonist, and you can you get what I'm saying though, as far as this is a layered story where basically you're kind of going from different one to different one. And you can have all these different aspects, there's all these different, perks for it. from here. But with the gentleman, what we've got here is Guy Ritchie's one, which basically what it looks like is you usually have like, I don't know, 6 to 10 different storylines going. And you just don't know how each one is going to go in it from there. So we'll kind of start and working through. So basically it starts off with basically our main character, we come to find out, Mr. Mickey Pearson. And this is Matthew McConaughey's character, and he goes into a bar and he's drinking and he gets shot. Yeah. So we'll call this plotline 1. And then plotline 2 is going to be this gentleman named Fletcher. I like how they call his name. Fletcher and Ray. And Fletcher is kind of a bit of a scummy, seedy sort of blackmailer, basically. And basically he goes, I'm going to tell you a story. We're going to tell you a story. And the story is all about Mickey Pearson. And he's just like, okay, so now we're getting the idea. He's been shot. And now we're going to figure out the story. What happens in the story about Mickey Pearson? Because now we have a lot of questions. This is that, aspect that I just talked about. What happens next? Who shot him? Why did they shoot him? You have all these questions basically from here. And then this goes into this plot line. And then we kind of go, I'm going to call this third plot line, but it doesn't quite count. So this is going to be Mickey Pearson young. And basically we get, an intro into his past. We establish him as a very strong character. So this is not a rando. This is a very strong character. From here, working up through the ranks, basically what he does is he sells weed to rich kids. Or just rich people in general, I guess. Because, those rich kids get old, as you may imagine. So from there, so there's that. So you got them. And then, basically, then, of course, and then what we're doing is the way this plot works is it's constantly cutting back and forth between these. So basically what we're doing is we're doing a little bit here, and then we're jumping over here, and then we're here, and then we're jumping up here to the young, and then we're going down here to this one, and then we're jumping back to here. We'll call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're back to Raymond and Fletcher. And then with Raymond and Fletcher, basically they're talking about how Mickey is he's going soft. He's going to sell the business. So he's trying to sell the business. And this introduces us to number 4, which is a Matthew Berger, who's a kind of flirty little, they describe him kind of as a flirty little Jew, basically, but he's the American. He's an American looking to buy, basically, from here. So now we've got this. We got this one going right here. And so he's looking to buy the business, because, of course, Mickey's looking to sell it. And so what you have is they're at this dinner party with all these nobles, and Matthew's throwing all of this money around. You can kind of see he's very powerful, very rich, and everything like that. And then basically they start sizing each up. So it's kind of Matthew versus Mickey Pearson. And they kind of start trying to size each other up and figure out basically, because again, Mickey's presented with this problem is if you sell your business, people will think you're going soft, which means they'll try and kill you and take it. And so he has to kind of do this dance from here. And then we jump back to here. And then we go back to here. This is 6, 7. Again, I'm going to lose track of the numbers because they keep cutting back and forth. But I want to give you guys an idea of kind of what this looks like on paper. If you were to write a story like this, or what does this look like, when you're writing this from here. And we're going to introduce a new character. So, new character. And this is story number 5. This is Big Dave. Oops. Big Dave. Big Dave. Big Dave, it turns out, is a newspaper editor who hates Mickey Pearson. So he hates Mickey. And basically what happened is Mickey humiliated him at a party, and now he hates him and is out for blood. And again, remember, all of this story is basically told in the shadow of this. This is how they start the movie off. They just go, bang, question. And the question, of course, is who shot him? Why did they do it? Da-da-da-da. Well, how did it happen? Basically, what are all the details surrounding him getting shot? So, we have a guy. We're introduced. Think of this like Clue. We're being slowly introduced. Again, because the story is very tongue-in-cheek and kind of meta, because what you have is you have Fletcher, who's telling the story, and he's telling it as a story. So he's in a story telling a story about a, telling the story of Mickey Pearson, which is the main character of the movie. So it's kind of meta in that regard, where he's kind of going, hey, well, he introduces this character and introduce that character. And he's kind of playing this over dramatized sort of ordeal with it all. And he's kind of playing this up. And this is kind of where we get to see this whole thing begin to play out. So what we've got now is we've got Big Dave, we've got Matthew Berger, and we're getting more of Mickey Pearson's story itself. So he humiliates Big Dave, and now Big Dave hates him. So there we go. And so then we go back to, from here to, I think back to Fletcher, who then is talking about it, and they go back to Matthew, where they're wanting to know, how does Mickey do it? Because he sells basically a whole bunch of weed, and he's got a giant empire. So the question, of course, is how does he do it? How does the empire run into play? How does this go? What on earth is going on? And so what we've got here is what we're showing, basically more and more of this story. Because again, all of this is leading back from Mickey Pearson getting shot. And so the question, of course, is what happens? And so what we're introducing as each story is playing out, we're getting more characters. So it's the question, did Matthew shoot him? Did Big Dave shoot him? Did Fletcher shoot him? Did Ray shoot him? Because we don't really know what Ray's involvement is at this point, And so what it does, and then basically what Fletcher says is now we're going to introduce our antagonist, what he calls our antagonist, which is Dry Eye, which is a great name. All right, so we're introducing our characters. Our main character is Dry Eye, and this is a Chinese gangster. So we're a Chinese gangster, and he's introduced as this, suave Chinese debonair James Bond. And they're like, and Fletcher's kind of, showing him as like shooting up all this place, and they're like, and then Ray's like, that's not Dry Eye. And he's like, yeah, I know, I was embellishing a little bit. So now we introduce with this concept of the unreliable narrator, and this is kind of an aspect. This is one aspect. Let's see, unreliable. This is one aspect that I wish they would have played more on. They kind of show this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but they don't really rely heavily on it and really cast a lot of doubt, because mostly like 95 to 98% of everything Fletcher says we kind of take as truth. And I wish they did kind of sell that a little bit more. There's still some lies and some embellishments and some questions and stuff like this, but I honestly would have preferred them do a little bit more, kind of crank that up a little bit, because then you could have really played with the ambiguity, because again, it's from this point of view. And we don't know if he's actually correct at this point. So from there, so Dry Eye, basically James Bond, so he's the gangster, he's doing all this stuff, and at this point, think of, we're like 20, 30 minutes in, these are all the plot lines we got. We got Mickey Pearson at some point in the future getting shot, we've got Fletcher and Ray, we've got Mickey Pearson younger, or the past, basically, so we know the past is going to eventually lead here. We've got Matthew Berger, we've got Big Dave, who hates him, and we got Dry Eye, who also is a gangster. So now we're introducing another guy who's been introduced to us as the antagonist. So the question is, maybe he shot him. Who knows? So he's a smuggler from there, and he's smuggling stuff. And then we are introduced to, I'm really running out of room here, but we'll go down here. Number 7, and this is Rosalind Pearson, who is Mickey's wife. She runs a weird chop shop car place, luxury cars, car place detailing, I guess. I don't know what that is from there. Luxury car place, and she is given a gift from Dry Eye for stuff in order to have in order to get a meeting with Mickey, with her husband, basically from there. So again, we have another question. They seem to love each other, so there doesn't appear to be anything there. And she's kind of introduced as a, as a weakness for him, and we'll see. Maybe that'll come up. Dun, 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 dun. Foreshadowing here from the author, because basically what they're trying to build up is we don't really get to see too much, an insane much about a muscle from Mickey. Mickey generally has been running around doing it himself at this point. He's kind of, him and Ray basically do everything. He doesn't delegate all this off to a lot of other people from here. So, and at this point of the story, we get more developing from Ray's story, because Ray is like, you need to give me 20 million. I think he says it before, but we'll introduce it here. 20 million to make this story go away. And basically then at this point, the question is, why are we going to give you 20 million? And so then we realize that, oh yeah, Fletcher, we don't really know where he comes into this point. We just know he shows up at Ray's house and he starts talking. And Ray doesn't like him. It's kind of slimy and he's kind of sleazy, but he knows all about these other stories. So what's up, basically? We don't really understand, where he fully fits in this regard. So, and this is the question. We don't know, where does Fletcher come into play? And now we're asking the question, oh yeah, this guy who's been here, what does he want? Turns out he wants 20 bucks or 20 million quid. And so he goes, and then Ray over here is basically going to go, and they're like, hey, well, let's keep talking. Why don't you make me a steak? And he's like, fine. All right. So he goes and makes the steak. And then it turns out that there is a body in the freezer. And so now we have a lot of questions for Ray, because he has a dead body in his freezer, and that's not normal. And so we have a lot of questions, and then we cut. And so we also get introduced to another character. We'll put him down here, number 8, who's called Lord George. And he is Dry Eye's boss. He's kind of the boss of the, I don't know if they call him Yakuza over there. They're very much British, Chinese, like the Hong Kong sort of crowd. That connection is coming into play. So he's the boss of Dry Eye, but he's Lord George, and that's who they bring him in here. So we get this, and again, what we're doing with the stories, we're constantly cutting back and forth, because again, Fletcher in this is kind of the main point of view. This is kind of where everything's touching. So basically what you're having is it's jumping here, and then jumping back, and then jumping here, and then jumping back, and then jumping over here, and then jumping back. And this is kind of the tango that we're doing. And what you can do with this as far as the story goes, and as far as techniques go, is basically what you have is you can use it to cut out all the boring bits. So you can kind of use this to continually ask questions, create intrigue from here. Because if you think if we've got a few different plot lines, we'll call this one A, we'll call this one B, we'll call this one C, and stuff from there. So one way that they did it, and I was rewatching sections of it earlier today, and one of the things you have is, so let's say Dry Eye meets Mickey Pearson, because again, this is arranged by Rosalind and MP. And so what you have is basic, and then we won't actually cover C. We're going to ignore C. We're just doing A and B. So what you have here is Dry Eye arrives. So you're showing the scene where Dry Eye arrives. Bam. And then it cuts to Fletcher, and they're talking about it. And they're going, oh, well, why would Dry Eye meet? They're out doing all this exposition where they're asking all of these questions. And then in the next scene, when you see Dry Eye arrive, he's sitting down at the table. And so what you've done is basically, again, this is a small thing, but you can do this with bigger aspects, is there's a section of the movie that's missing where Dry Eye walks and goes, hello, Mickey, my name is Dry Eye. You may know me. I know you. Do we establish this? I know of you, this, that. Walks over, sits down at the table. His man is over there leaning up against the wall. They search him. They do all this stuff. All of this stuff is missing here. And we just cut to, bam, Dry Eye's here, bam, Dry Eye's at the table. You could just do a cut. You could do a normal cut. But what you're doing is you're adding this level of intrigue where you're going, hey, something's going to happen, cut to something else. And you're like, what's going to happen? What you're doing is you're letting it build, letting the intrigue and all the questions and priming everything here, cut to it from here. And then you cut back. And then you cut over here. And they're like, wait a minute. Because then he starts talking, this is how the conversation went. And then Mickey pulls out his gun and kills Dry Eye and kills his guy and laughs at him and gives this huge monologue, this overdramatic monologue. And he's like, wait a minute, that's not how it happens. And he goes, yeah, it wasn't. This is actually how it happened. And so what you can do is you can also play with it that way. That's kind of the reason why it works so well, is because Fletcher really, really fancies himself as a movie scriptwriter. He's this storyteller who loves telling these elaborate stories and knowing all these parts. So what you can do is you can use this to cut out the boring bits where, hey, I need a character to go and confront this drug dealer and then leave, and then he's going to go home and search a house. And it's like, okay, what are the boring parts there? When he's going to the drug dealer, when he's talking to the drug dealer, that's probably interesting. We're going to keep that. When he's leaving the drug dealer's house, when he's driving to somewhere else, when he's going to the other house, you can just cut directly to it. That's what most movies do, is they'll just cut to it and then they'll just piece it all together, and they'll just cut out like driving time and stuff like that. But you could also do it. Another thing that it does is, this is the weird reason why the multi-thread story works fairly well, is what you have is you having a bigger world. You don't have one single plot line, because what you know is that while this is going on, this is going on, and this is going on, and this is going on, and this is the world that you're after. And again, nothing's better or worse. It's different. It just depends on how well you do it. That's all. That's the only thing that matters. So what you have now is you have this section, and then it goes to here, and then it goes down to here, and then it goes down to here, and then it goes back up to here, which goes back up to here, which goes up to here, which goes down to here. And what you're doing is you're interlayering all these different pieces. And what this also allows is it also allows you to do things and pull characters out of thin air, seemingly thin air, you know, and use them and have them intersect with each other, and then it becomes really interesting. Snatch does this really, really well, because he keeps introducing like the Jewish guy from New York who's after the diamond, and then the British gangsters, and then that one guy, you know, the big fat guy, and they go to rob, and this, and it's just all this different stuff going on. So you have all of these different aspects in play that you can use for. So from here, and then it turns out they start meeting, and then Mickey tells Dry Eye to screw off, and then we get introduced to our group number 9, which are the toddlers. And this are a bunch of British kids, or they're like young men in their 20s and stuff like that, and they're boxing. They're very, very well good at fighting, and they're filming this video, and they go and raid one of Mickey's basically farms. They raid the farm, film it, beat up all their guys, steal all their stuff. And so now we're adding another one. And then basically from here, the question, of course, is, you know, what's going on? Who are the toddlers? Will they film these videos? They're just kind of doing it for kicks and giggles, basically, for that matter. And, you know, for the looking cool, they're looking gangsta. But then also they're getting all this money. And then turns out somebody else is trying to figure out who they stole it from. And then we are introduced to Coach, who's number 10. So again, to summarize, Mickey's dead. He got shot. Fletcher and Ray. Mickey when he's young, with a previous past timeline. We have Matthew. We have Big Dave, who hates Mickey. We have Dry Eye. We have Rosalind. We have Lord George. We have the toddlers. We have Coach. These are all the different plot lines that he's doing. And what he's able to do is constantly introducing new stuff. This is 1, to keep everything interesting. 2, to kind of continually jumble everything, because this is the plot. It's constantly changing. Bam, 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 bam. From on to the next, you know, from here to here to here to here to here to here. You can see all the arrows. Like, I would very quickly lose track of all my paper if you're going to jump through all this. And it looks really cool. It looks cool to see all this story. So what you have is you're really moving away from this stereotypical plot line and going for a much, much, much messier thing. And so what we've got now, again, is the question is, you know, who shot Mickey Pearson? You know, who's behind it? Who's going into all this? And so basically from here, now we're introduced to kind of the character, but this is more of a subplot line. We're introduced to Ray in the past, and he's going to go rescue Lord Pressfield's daughter. And this is how Big Dave is going to take down Mickey Pearson. He's going to use Lord Pressfield's daughter and smear them in the public eye. He's basically from here. So what you have is you have all of these characters in here, and basically it's a giant whodunit. It's a giant whodunit. You know, who's going to do it? You know, what's going to happen next? And this is what the multi-thread story is allowing you to do. You're introducing all of these different characters. The other thing that we don't really see in this movie, because as we come to learn at some point, and even though that there's actually more characters than this. So what we've got over here is we've got, they rescue Lord Pressfield and accidentally throw a kid out of an alley, or out of the window, who turns out to be the body in his freezer, because they accidentally kill him because he's living in a slumlord. Turns out he's got a Russian accent, and turns out that becomes important, because over here, we got number 12, is Aslan, because Aslan is the kid who died. Aslan Sr. is a Russian drug lord. Maybe not drug lord. He's just really powerful. I don't think he's gas. He was in gas. I think that was what it was. So maybe he's not even a drug lord, but he's nevertheless very shady, and he's got people who are willing to kill people. And so they're trying to kill Mickey Pearson. And so it turns out that this is the person who shot Mickey, but then it turns out that it was actually Ray who shot the guy who was trying to shoot Mickey, and so Mickey's alive. And so the main difference between this one from Snatch is we do have a main character. We do have a likable main character, because Mickey's very likable. You know, he takes care of all of his people. He's nice. He kind of has a moral code, as it were. You know, he sees himself as better than the people who deal in heroin and prostitution and cocaine and all this stuff like this. You know, he very much sees himself as above it because it's it's cleaner. You know, it's not killing anyone. And you can see this he has this moral code, and he's only killing people who are going against him in this kind of self-defense sort of action. So we like this character a lot. In Snatch and Lock, Stock, I don't think you have that as much, particularly in Snatch. You don't really have a main character because you have Jason Statham's character. But then he kind of is not really great. He kind of gets made a fool of, and that's it. So we don't really like him because we don't want to, he doesn't seem to know what's going on. Whereas Brad Pitt's character seems to know what's going on, but then he's pretty cool to watch. But then he's kind of not scummy, but he's sneaky, shall we say. He's very sneaky. But again, he's not really the main character. And again, what you do though with Snatch is what you're making sure is there's no main character, so that when they die, or if you need to kill them off, it's not that big of a deal. You're not attached to it. You're not killing the main character, because if you kill the main character here, then this entire back place is now shadowed in the death of the MC, basically, the main character. The entire thing is overshadowed. Whereas if you have something like this, he dies here, this is basically shrouded, and basically it becomes it's less of a tragedy, basically, because if you don't want a tragedy, that's how you can make sure it doesn't turn into one accidentally, is you have multiple characters, so that way if the guy dies, someone else can take his place. And so this is kind of the powder keg. And what you have is, with all of these characters that we've got, it all kind of builds towards this crescendo and toward to answering the question, who is behind, who's trying to shoot Mickey Pearson, who's causing all of this to happen, and what's going on from there. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.